Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the NWR Virtual Healthcare Day for November 2021. My name is Finn Blake, and I'm your host for this afternoon. Up next, last but not least, we have Navier Medical. Navier is developing innovative new software-based medical devices to reduce the number of people dying from heart attacks worldwide. Navier is developing two software-as-a-service products addressing coronary artery disease, Mosaic and Apricot. These are aimed at unmet needs for clinicians to better identify the risk of patients when they are present at hospital. These products have huge addressable markets surpassing a combined $35 billion. This afternoon, I have the Executive Director, Dr. Barry Doyle, joining me live. If anyone in the audience would like to submit a question for the Q&A session at the end of the presentation, please do type your questions using the Q&A function on your screen. Do that at any time throughout the presentation and we'll be able to answer your questions at the end. So without further ado, I will hand it straight over to Barry.
All righty. Yeah, thanks Finn for the lovely introduction, and good afternoon, everyone. So as Finn said, my name is Barry Doyle and I'm Executive Director of Navier Medical. And so we're a recent spin-out company from the University of Western Australia and the Harry Perkins Institute of Medical Research over here in Perth. So I'll assume that can be read. So look, just some highlights of today's talk. Ultimately, what we're doing here is developing new technology to predict heart attacks. So just about 3 weeks ago, I think it was, we were named the Western Australia Innovator of the Year in the Emerging Innovation category. And obviously that was a fantastic kind of stamp of validation for what we've been doing here for a number of years now. And yeah, it was just a fantastic to get that kind of that badge. So as Finn said, we've a combined global market opportunity of over 30 billion. Broadly speaking, the kind of non-invasive imaging market is about $20 billion, and as cardiovascular disease is, it's the world's biggest killer, absolutely hands down. It's an ever expanding market and an opportunity. So as I mentioned, we're a spin-out technology from UWA and the Perkins, UWA being a global top 100 institute. And it's important to note that all IP has been assigned over to Navier Medical now. So we've got two products in our pipeline, that being Mosaic and Apricot. Mosaic is our first product that will be released, aiming for about a 2022 release, and Apricot then a couple of years later. We are going to be delivering these as SaaS models, so software as a service. And as I'm sure most of you know, the beauty of SaaS models is that it can leverage existing imaging in this case, and there's no real major expense or any training required for the user. We've got a range of different intellectual property from Navier Medical that has been assigned over from UWA, specifically a patent application, copyright, and a whole bunch of different trade secrets around our algorithms. And so our goal then is to go to IPO around about mid next year, and we've already reserved the ASX ticker NMX. Okay, so just to give you a bit of a kind of timeline of our journey so far and where we're going. So the project actually began in 2014. And so it was a collaboration between myself and Professor Carl Schultz, who's a interventional cardiologist at UWA and also at the Royal Perth Hospital. So I mean, you know, Carl came to me with a clinical problem. You know, his patients, despite all the best treatment, they were still having major events. So what we started to do was kind of conceptualize what could be done in the space, and then over about 7 years of academic research, we developed early prototypes, developed proof of concept. And then in about 2019, then we really started to think about commercialization. And this was supported by the University of Western Australia. They provided what's called Pathfinder funding to really kind of get us on our journey. And we used that money to develop a voice of user or voice of customer study. There was a bunch of publications, several different PhDs, master's projects, and a lot of conference presentations over those 7 years. And it was really in July this year where we incorporated Navier Medical spinning out of UWA and the Perkins. And since then, we've had a few different wins. We've had some publications in some of the top cardiology journals at the world's largest Cardiology Conference also, and we filed our patent with Raise. Just recently then, we've done a seed round, raising 1.4 million. Otto Batula has joined as chairman-elect, and we've expanded the team, recruiting some key personnel to really fast-track development. And then, as I mentioned just a couple of weeks ago, then we won the Innovator of the Year in the Emerging Innovation category. And some other timelines on the horizon then, so milestones being the development of a beta prototype of Mosaic in about Q2 next year. In between that and submitting to the all the international regulatory bodies, we think it's a good time to go to IPO. And then following on from that, further development of Apricot, clinical trial of Apricot, and then submission to regulatory bodies. So this is what the team looks like. So we have a leadership team of Otto Batula, myself, Candace Stevenson, and Paul Fromson. And just to give you a little bit of further background on us, so Otto has a lot of experience leading companies to quite significant success. Some of the highlights being Hub24 and IWL that was sold to Commonwealth. So I'm also an associate professor of biomedical engineering at UWA, and I'm the head of cardiovascular science and diabetes at the Harry Perkins Institute. And I run a research group there called the Vascular Engineering Laboratory. And so that's where the technology was developed between myself and Dr. Lachlan Kelsey, who performed his PhD in this area, and also in close collaboration with Carl Schultz, our interventional cardiologist. And so we've been kind of expanding the team over the last couple of years, but really intensively recently recruiting software engineers and image analysis experts and those with quality and regulatory expertise. And we've also got a strong advisory team through Tom Curnow, who was with a company called Abbott Vascular, who many of you will know. They're a major company in the cardiovascular space. So Tom was with them for about 14 years and held quite significant roles there, including the global marketing director. And also Sander Bangma. Sander was with a company called Resonance Health, who are also a listed company. Sander started off there as a software developer and ended up as managing director over the course of about 12 years. And Sander was really key to getting some of their software as a service products into hospitals globally. So we think we've got a pretty good team to launch our development with. And so what are we actually targeting then? Well, it's coronary artery disease. So this is part of the kind of spectrum of cardiovascular disease or heart disease. And so this is the buildup of fatty plaque inside the arteries, which will eventually block blood flow to the heart, causing the heart attack itself. And so this aspect of heart disease is killing about 9 million people globally every year. And it's responsible for about 12% of all deaths here in Australia. And so it's killing about one person every 30 minutes. So this is really significant. And so also of those who have a heart attack and either make it to hospital or die, about 50% of them have disease that is actually not really well visible on the current imaging modalities that cardiologists use. So really there's a very clear unmet need here. Clinicians need better methods to stratify the risk of the patient when they first present to a hospital or a clinic. And it's very well understood that the characterization of plaque risk based on anatomy alone is just simply not sufficient. And so this is something that not many people know. It's of those who actually have a heart attack and who make it into hospital and have an invasive procedure, which is called percutaneous coronary intervention. So think of it essentially as a stent. So 1 in 3 of those patients who think that they're fixed and return home after what is a really scary event, 1 in 3 will actually die or have another heart attack within 3 years. And that's despite all the best management and best imaging and medication and practice that a cardiologist can currently deliver. And this is Australian data. It's slightly different internationally. It's about 1 in 5, but that's over 2 years. So ultimately, this is a really big problem that we've been trying to build solutions for. And so what these solutions are then, it's the combination of anatomy that the cardiologist or radiologist is used to making decisions based on, but bringing in engineering and computer science to create a more complete risk profile. And as I've mentioned, we've 2 SaaS products currently in development. And so these are addressing the full spectrum of coronary artery disease. So Mosaic is our first product. This is everyone with suspected coronary artery disease. And what we're doing with Mosaic is building this to work with non-invasive imaging methods. So think of CT scans. And what we are hoping to do here is to be able to predict who's at risk of having their first heart attack. And this is quite a substantial market at a little over 20 billion Australian dollars. And then our second product is called Apricot. And so this is for patients who are in hospital being treated for a heart attack. So this uses invasive imaging. So there's cameras and little guide wires being passed into the diseased artery. And what we're trying to do here is not only help guide treatment, but also predict who's at risk of having another heart attack. So who's at risk of becoming that 1 in 3 statistic. And this is also a substantial market at over 14 billion Australian dollars. So just to dive a little bit deeper into these 2 products then. So Mosaic is a class 2 software as a medical device. And in the US for the FDA approval, there's predicate devices available. So there's a relatively straightforward route to approval there. And so what Mosaic is doing then, it's really understanding the plaque development process. So if you think about as you age and as the disease process starts to accelerate, your arteries start to become calcified. So imagine this, your arteries turning to bone essentially. So they start off as tiny little microcalcifications, and these cluster and clump together over time to form macrocalcifications or larger calcifications. And it's the larger macrocalcifications that are visible on CT scans. And this is what's used to compute a coronary calcium score. However, it's these microcalcifications that are actually really dangerous because they destabilize the plaque. And these calcifications are so small, you can't see them on CT scans. But there is a way to visualize them and quantify them through injecting a radio tracer, so a special dye into the bloodstream. And that dye binds onto the microcalcification and tags it. And then when the dye is circulating through the body, you put the patient into a PET CT scanner, and then the activity, so the microcalcification activity glows up like a heat map, just like this example image you can see here, which is kind of taken from cancer. So the whole technique is translated out of oncology. And it's shown a lot of promise in cardiology now. So the most recent data, and this is from long-term collaborators of mine at the University of Edinburgh. So what they've shown is that if you can stratify or separate the patients into no activity, low activity, or those with high activity, those patients with high microcalcification activity have a 7-fold increased risk of having a heart attack. So this is phenomenal. And so this could be a new silver bullet for identifying those at early risk of having a future heart attack. But there are some quite significant barriers to sodium fluoride PET imaging. And these are really going to limit it ever becoming a kind of widespread tool. So first of all, it's very expensive. The radio tracer, that special dye that gets injected into your blood, can make you quite sick. As it's an imaging procedure, there's a lot of excess radiation exposure. And then the images from PET CT, they're actually quite poor quality because the PET imaging is really like a heat map rather than a kind of description of the anatomy. Because the imaging is complex, it needs quite a few different experts in the room to really understand what's happening. And that means that there's about a 2-day turnaround on the scans. The knock-on effect of that is it's only available in the top research centers. And so because it'll never be a routine tool, there will be cases that will be missed unless everyone receives PET. So what we're doing is developing a way to get the data without the PET imaging. And so this is what Mosaic does. So it's a well-worn path now of a SaaS model where the cardiologist uploads the scans to a cloud server, algorithms take over, and then return the data quite fast back to the clinician. So we have artificial intelligence that performs all the reconstructions of the images themselves. And these also take over and create all the important data. And so it's the information that the clinician is currently using to make decisions around calcification and stenosis, and also giving them additional information on the plaque itself. But what we're really excited about is our ability then to create a way of determining the sodium fluoride uptake, so this microcalcification activity. And so what we can do is split the cases into whether they have low, no, or high activity, and really try answer the question of who has high activity and is at risk of having a heart attack. So what we're doing is building a way to get all the benefits of the sodium fluoride PET without the challenges of the sodium fluoride PET imaging. And this is something that we're really quite excited about here. So using a SaaS model and charging $1,500 per case, we get some idea of the global market. So our total addressable market, this is based on the number of scans, of CT scans being performed in some of the major jurisdictions globally. It's over $20 billion. If we assume that about 60% of those scans actually show signs of disease, it gives us an addressable market of about 13.5 billion. And then, as will be quite a unique product, we think we can eventually grow to about a 10% market share, which would be a little under 1.5 billion. So our target customers being radiology and cardiology practices, both in the public and private sectors. And some of the other players in the space then would be heart flow. So heart flow are really the big one here when it comes to advanced CT-based analysis. And they're really getting quite well known now for their CT FFR. There's also a company also local here from Perth called Artria that some of you may have heard of. So they've an advanced plaque analysis tool. And there's a US-based company that have also got an advanced plaque analysis tool called Clearly. But again, we'll be the only company that can offer this microcalcification activity tool. Okay, so Apricot then is another class 2 software as a medical device. Similar to Mosaic, it has a 510K pathway to approval. And what we're doing with Apricot then is really trying to bring ways to the cardiologist of understanding the mechanical forces that play in the arteries. So there's two important forces. One is shear stress, one is structural stress. The shear stress being the frictional force on the artery, which is predictive of plaque growth. And then the structural stress, so the force trying to break apart that plaque over every cardiac cycle. This is the tension on the artery that predicts the plaque rupture. So there's no current ways to measure these using commercial methods. So that's what we've spent quite a lot of time over the last number of years doing, is building the world's first commercial method to estimate these forces. So we take optical coherence tomography imaging, which is, think of it as a tiny camera on the end of a wire, looking at the arteries from the inside out in extremely high resolution detail. So the pixel size is about 10 microns. So it's about the same size as the cells in the walls of the artery. We then merge those images with angiography, create very high resolution 3D reconstructions for computer simulations for both what's called computational fluid dynamics, so flow modeling, and also finite element analysis, so structural stress modeling. And we're developing ways to perform these simulations extremely quickly so that the cardiologist can actually use the data in the cath lab to help guide their stent placement, but then also create an offline report that can be assessed after the procedure, where the cardiologist can really assess that residual risk of the patient. So are they going to be the 1 in 3? So we're putting new critical information into the hands of the interventional cardiologist here with Apricot. And so, as I mentioned, what we're trying to do is enable a way to have this performed in real time in the cath lab, so it can help save the life and give a better outcome of the procedure, but also reduce that 1 in 3 risk of having another heart attack in the future. And that's where we can give the cardiologist our plaque development index and plaque stability index data. Okay, so again, using a SaaS model and charging $1,500 per case. Based on the number of patients that present with acute coronary syndrome or heart attacks in some of the major jurisdictions globally, there's a total market of about $14.5 billion. Now, optical coherence tomography is not used routinely. It's used in probably less than 5% of cases at the moment, but there are some major clinical trials underway being led by Abbott Vascular. And so it's expected that over the next few years that OCT usage is going to grow towards about 20% of cases. And again, we'll have a very unique product here, and we'll be the only ones offering a certain level of service. So we think that we can grow towards about a 10% market share in the future. And so our target customer for Apricot then is interventional cardiology practices. And there are competitors, and Abbott being the main player. So they are the ones that actually manufacture and produce the OCT imaging equipment. And we've developed quite a nice relationship with Abbott, and they're currently funding a clinical trial that we're involved in. And then there are other players such as Pi Medical, Cathworks, and also you have to acknowledge HeartFlow in the space as well. So again, it's a software as a service, and we can have a pay per case scenario as well as annual subscriptions. We will be working towards reimbursement in the future because that's important for any medical device. And then in terms of market access and assessment, the local economics, the health economics will really help inform our pricing. So that's going to be an important task for us to do in the future. And then there are also data protection and privacy acts that we're well aware of, and we're building them into our software models. So we've had quite a bit of traction over the years. So first of all, we've been well supported by the University of Western Australia and the Harry Perkins Institute. We've also been in discussions with Seaman Healthineers. So what they acknowledged was that our team is leading in terms of technical development among the groups working globally in this area. So that was a really nice kind of external validation as to what we're doing here. And so they're keen for us to keep checking in with them as we progress, specifically when we get FDA approval. And also Abbott Vascular. So we've got quite a nice relationship with them. They're funding a clinical trial to explore Apricot. It's called the Puffball study. And again, they're keen to be kept informed as we move along our journey. And so just recently then we presented our work at the European Society of Cardiology, which is about 30,000 delegates, and also published in the Journal of American College of Cardiology in the Imaging Journal, which is one of the premier journals in this field. So I'm getting to the end of the presentation now. Just some contact details. As I said, my name is Barry Doyle. You can reach me at the email address there or call me anytime. And yeah, would love to answer any questions you guys have.
Beautiful. Thanks, Barry. That was great presentation. There is the first question here, which did come a little bit earlier before you mentioned Artria, a company which did raise some money for an ASX listing. So can you please just reinforce, the biggest differences between you and them?
Yeah, it's the microcalcification activity. So that is something that we've been developing for the past number of years. So Artria are developing a tool, or have developed a tool to analyze the coronary CT scans, and it looks like quite a nice tool. And there's some kind of direct competitors to that, such as Clearly Labs. So our offering will be that plus microcalcification activity, which again, to the best of my knowledge, there'll be no one else able to provide.
Yeah. And another one. So what's the strategy in terms of key opinion leaders and attracting awareness of this technology?
Yeah, so we work with cardiologists locally. We've got quite a good network through Carl Schultz, but I'm also quite connected through my links with the University of Edinburgh. And specifically, there's cardiologists there, Professor David Newby. So I've worked with David Newby, who's a real pioneer of sodium fluoride PET imaging. And he's an internationally recognized expert in all forms of cardiology. So Dave Newby, I've been working with him for about 10 to 12 years now. So I've got a pretty good link with him, and through those networks, they're very well connected globally. So partnering with key opinion leaders is going to be one of our key strategies to enable them to use our products and start publishing independent research.
Amazing. Probably got time for one more, Barry. What's the main reason you're confident in the Navier business as we approach the new year?
The products that we're developing are quite unique globally. So again, like I've mentioned, we've, to the best of my knowledge, there's no one else has the ability to offer microcalcification activity without jumping through the hoops of a sodium fluoride PET image. And also with Apricot, the algorithms that we've developed are quite unique. One of the key bottlenecks of running computer simulations in the clinic is the computational power needed to perform the simulations. So we've developed ways to run really, really fast simulations and get the same data as 3 days on a supercomputer. So that's what I'm really excited about, is bringing engineering into the clinic.
Amazing. Dr. Barry Doyle, thank you so much for your time today. Really excited to continue watching this story.
All right. Cheers, Finn. Thanks. And thanks everyone for your attention.
That'll do it for the NWR